Hi Raghu, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Mohan.
Very good to meet you. You're in Southern California right now, but how's it that your background is from Northern California? What's the deal here?
So I'm trying to throw people off.
That's a smart move. That's a pretty smart move. I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the Golden Gate Bridge is so iconic in many senses. And just above where you are is where, very close to where you are is the Treasure Island, right? That's the location as well. You get a lot of nice photographs from there, but it's a beautiful place. I absolutely love it. Give me a 2 minute background on just yourself, Raghu. So, for people in the
I see.
audience, talk to us a little bit about your story arc. You've talked to me about your background. You've
Sure.
studied. You've taught. You've also been in MIT and Columbia teaching. Talk to me a little bit about the other things that you've done so far.
Um, so, I've done a lot of things because I'm originally from Singapore. I've done from early age. I've done everything from not only on the software side, coding since I was 12, but Singapore, all males have to go to military. So I did 2.5 years of military, which is, obviously had an impact on how I look at things in life from a discipline and, hard work and that type of standpoint. And then outside of that, I play soccer and still in touch with all my buddies who are into soccer. Either we watch or we play, and into English league because that's the league that we
Nice,
all
nice.
follow. Yeah. And so that keeps me going. And then the usual movies and other streaming and so on and working out. And so all of those things complement my techie sort of self. And I actually, when it comes to technology, because I've had so many startups, either as a founder or co-founder, I don't look at it as work. I look at it as just fun for me. I'm just passionate about things, and so creating and innovating things, I love doing it, and that keeps me going.
Awesome. So, you're working now with Synergistics. Tell us, which is an agent AI company. First, let's start with what made you want to start Synergistics. Walk us through what did you see in, 2, 3 years ago that, or maybe even more than that, that said, you know what, agent to agent communication is an important element. I want to innovate there. What are the things that you saw that you think are things that will be in the future that we don't see right now?
Yeah. So actually, synergetics, but one thing I learned just before I get into the answer was the word synergy, synergetic.
Yeah,
I just didn't know that, but it's that's the truth. But anyway, so the way how I got into this was first of all, I think agents, the idea of agents has been in my mind for a while, and I think it's a natural extension of process automation and things like that. But
yeah,
then when an agent has to think on its own, then you get into the world of autonomous agents, and they have to use certain principles such as reflection, tooling, planning, and things like that to solve problems. So that's the autonomous agent. But an agent acting on its own has only got so much value. And in most ecosystems, whether we take healthcare or banking or even in the B2C side of things, there is a need for AI agents to communicate with one another. And,
yeah,
and so in that space, there's a sort of a void. At least when we started, there's a void. That void is being sort of like slowly but surely building blocks are emerging to kind of fill that void. And so we started to draft a protocol called Agent Talk and to fill that void. Now, interestingly enough, after we got our patent and we developed Agent Talk, recently Google introduced A2A, which is Agent Agent Protocol. And there are, we are a superset of it because Agent Agent Protocol typically is aimed at the enterprise. That means it functions within the enterprise, agents working within the enterprise. We see opportunities beyond the enterprise. That is, for example, in a payer and provider infrastructure or ecosystem in healthcare
yeah.
or in trade finance. You have exporters, importers, exporters bank, importers bank, logistics company, shipping company, and so on. there were 7 or 8 actors in that sort of ecosystem. There is opportunities for agents to communicate across enterprise boundaries. And we're also talking to a major, um, what do you call it, a blockchain company, which is a listed company, which has been talking to us about trying to work with us to implement agent to merchant infrastructure such that the world we have to imagine in the future is not you and me going to websites to go and shop for things.
Yeah,
It is our digital twin that might be doing that activity on its own. And that means the agent would have to be empowered to go and shop, to pay, to transact, and maybe even return items. So, how does that come about? But if every merchant is doing that in their own flavor, then you have 1,001 different adaptations of this particular problem. The idea here is to figure out a common substrate that can be plug and play for most merchants to use. So we're talking about implementing that, but that's just the tip of the iceberg because there's a lot of other things that come into play, such as if we see the sort of like blockchain or crypto sort of environment in the US is fast changing because when you talk about agents making payments and so on, it's no more dollars and cents. It's usually
yeah,
0.0000 something cents. It's going to be digital currency with many decimals and so on. So those types of transactions or micro transactions will far outstrip the regular transactions humans make. So this would be your car paying a parking meter or your avatar going to a website and doing some transaction and things like that. So what I'm saying is this agent infrastructure permeates into other areas such as payment. The Web 2 payment rails and the Web 3 payment rails need to come together. So we have taken care of a lot of these types of issues in building the ecosystem that we have in place currently.
got it. Tell me a little bit about your own personal use of AI and agents. Are you using it for automating some of the things that you did before? How are you using it? How is a CEO like you, a founder of a company, how are you using agents?
So in my personal use cases right now, I'm only using like what most people use, all the common tools for helping you craft marketing materials or writing or images or
Yeah,
short videos or things like that. Those are the common tools that I personally use. But when I put on my hat as a kind of a engineer to help companies solve their problems, then it's a broader spectrum of things that come to mind. And then today, actually, these tools are sort of like the first set of tools that we are seeing are very, I would say, the first innings of a baseball game sort of thing. They're very rudimentary and they do a single purpose type of thing. But I think coming up right after this are these complex multi-agent systems and so on, and that those get to solve really, really complex problems. And there will be winners, losers. There'll be companies getting disrupted as a result of this whole movement. Like for example, like a lot of BPO companies who are employing, they deploy 500 people at a financial institution
yeah.
to solve some BPO functions. Those days might be finding their Titanic iceberg moment because it may not it may not be there anymore because five agents can probably replace those 500 people in that BPO function. And I'm saying this from pretty deep knowledge, talking to some of these players who are dependent on those billing
Yeah.
to generate the revenues. And the big players who do all of that, and those people are prime for disruption, honestly. So,
Let me ask you something. When I talk to a lot of the big players, when I talk to executives, I get two specific feedback elements. Number one, they are increasingly being pushed to what they call outcome based pricing. And they are trying to make the move to outcome based pricing very quickly. So they are saying your outcome you want is making sure your customers are serviced, or your outcome that you want is customer acquisition or the customer, whatever is the outcome you want. We will price by outcome. And they believe that the pricing will reflect the value that they provide. So they're going to go to a value pricing model. If it costs, if for example, the value provided is $50, then they will get $5, or whatever the case might be.
Right.
I get one story around that. The second story I get is, well, we don't necessarily know if we need so many people to deliver that value. And so the question becomes now,
Right.
on one hand, they are excited that they can go to outcome-based pricing and they can generate the value for their clients and keep a portion of the value for themselves. On the other hand, I don't know if they are thinking seriously about the fact that if they can generate this value with agents, so can two people in a garage. And so now the playing field becomes dramatically leveled. When you talk to
Right.
some of these larger companies and customers and the use cases that you're thinking, do they even think about the fact that this is going to be very, very disruptive to a lot of these? Well, in some cases, it might be useful, but in many cases, it might be very disruptive.
Yeah. I would say that in two ways I'll talk about this. So the enterprises who have got certain workflows, whether let's say bank, insurance company, healthcare company, and so on, what they are doing today, they might be able to achieve greater margins because they will use more automation and fewer headcount to achieve the same outcome. So they will derive the benefits of that. The service providers to such companies, those people are ripe for disruption because they are the ones providing those headcount to do those functions, and those would be disrupted. From that, that's my first take on things.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of level playing field, you're absolutely right. So, a small enterprise uh, now can look like a much larger enterprise because it can, like a few people, one person of five top heavy people could have a team of 20, 50, 100 agents doing the work that they would previously have to hire at a fraction of the cost, and they can now be competitive or a threat to larger companies who have not adapted, let's say. So you can disrupt the market by being disrupt the incumbent in a particular field, coming in new with new technology, new ideas, new way of doing things at a fraction of the cost, and basically put some of these larger players, be a threat. Maybe not out of business, but be a threat. So I think that is very likely to happen. Very, very likely to happen.
Yeah. When you look at agents themselves doing some of the work, how do you take care of things that I hear consistently, which is hallucination? They are worried that the experiences are inconsistent, the results are inconsistent, the responses are
Mhm.
sometimes clear, sometimes very difficult. For example, they usually mention this horror story of Air Canada, someone going and asking for a discount and the agent giving them a 50% discount. But that's one story I've heard. I've not
Yeah,
heard
yeah, yeah.
too many after that, right? Are those exceptions, or are customers really starting to put a lot of these things in places where even the hallucination may not be a difficult challenge?
So I think what we I've seen is, and there are some companies advertising these things openly, which I think is a problem. But so let's take, first of all, let's look at AI in two phases. One is generative AI, which is like your right brain, and discriminative AI or classic AI, which is your left brain. The right brain is very art oriented and it is very non deterministic. The left brain is more science or math oriented and logic oriented. The results are very deterministic. Math, if I say 5 plus 5, it's always 10. It's not going to change to 9 or 8 or something. It's always that. Whereas if I told Leonardo da Vinci to go and paint the Mona Lisa twice in a row, most likely he'll give you two versions which are not exactly the same. Okay,
Yeah.
because it's a creative process. So this way, what happens is, first of all, I think a lot of folks think AI is magic. It's more statistical and heuristic in nature, so it's not magic. and they have to understand that it's not deterministic, especially when you use generative AI. Now, coming to the hallucination problem, the issue is it comes down to how are you training the brain of that particular agent. So we take a 5-step process to train fine-tune the agent's model. What I've seen even advertised is a lot of people just take out-of-the-box LLM and simply slap on what is known as retrieval-augmented generation,
Right.
and then say, okay, I've got an agent for you. So that is not going to hack it. I'll tell you why. And you are a smart guy. You probably know
It's a
what I'm
cheap
going to
and
say,
quick.
but
It's the
I'll
cheap and
repeat
quick
it.
approach, but doesn't do anything.
Doesn't do anything. That's why you get a lot of hallucination. So if you look at hallucination as a pyramid, right? And the more I fine tune, more levels I have, the top of the pyramid has got very little. It's very sharp.
Hmm.
The range of results is very little. So you get less hallucination. But if my pyramid only stops halfway, the range is quite broad. You see from here to here. So I could get one answer one time, another answer another time, and it's not really crisp. And why does that happen? So we spend a lot of time on fine tuning. So first of all, we'll take an out of the box LLM. Could be a paid model, could be a free model, open source or whatnot. Then we take industry information. So I'll give you an example of insurance. I might take broad insurance industry information. Then the next level is some subcategory of insurance, let's say auto insurance.
Yeah.
Then company information. Let's say I'm working with Allstate, it'll be Allstate information. And then customer information. So I'll get hooks into the CRM and whatnot. Now the model is very tuned for their particular need. So I'm not saying hallucination will never happen, but the range of results will be a lot more um, closer, so you won't get randomness as much. The variability is less. So that is one of the things that we do. Second thing is, let's say that you are an enterprise and you train your models, just for sake of argument, the first of every month. So first of June I train, then the next time I train is first of July, then first of August, and so on. And let's say I pick a random date like today, which is the 12th, I think 12th of June. So now let's say my model has not been trained for last 12 days. I'm using data from the 1st of June. The last 12 days, a lot of things might have changed. So then what happens is your model does not have the latest information. That's when you use RAG. You augment what you already have in the model with the latest information such that it's up to date. It has got the delta of 12 days added to it so that it knows what happened the last hour, the last day, and so on,
Right.
so that it's got the latest. So that's how you use it. But to answer your question, I think you have to do this fine tuning properly. You have to use RAG when it's supposed to be used, and then I think that hallucination problem can be tackled. But it's not. I cannot say that it can be completely solved, but it can be reduced in terms of the variability significantly if you do it this way. And then there are also certain other things we have in our decks and so on, but you can throttle certain things in your model for throughput, latency, accuracy, and a few other parameters, and that would even give you even fine-grained control over the answers.
So essentially, the standard deviation of the answer starts to reduce dramatically, is what happens.
Correct, correct,
Is this
exactly.
very similar to the approach that a lot of cybersecurity professionals talk about, white hat and red hat? They used to have these approaches,
Or
or
black hat,
whitelist and blacklist,
or,
whatever you want to call it.
yeah.
Yeah. So they used to make this
Yeah,
list
it
saying,
could be.
go ahead.
It could be like that. Yeah, it could be like what security guys do. But your previous point was exactly true. It's the variability that you want to reduce.
Tell me a little bit about the difference between fine tuning and prompt management. A lot of people I know
Hmm.
confuse, I get this very often. They think fine tuning means going to Chat GPT as an example and then putting a prompt and then giving an example output prompt and giving a system prompt and giving an output definition and saying, this is my fine tuning. That isn't fine tuning, correct? You're
No,
not,
no, no. Fine
that is
tuning
more like
prompt
predictable answer
engineering.
expectation. Sorry.
Yeah, that's prompt engineering and actually giving a very detailed prompt so that the thing knows more information so that it's going to get you a better answer. Fine tuning is basically, at the core of it is what data structure are you playing with, right? So you're playing with a vector database in the case of generative AI. So vector database, unlike a relational database like SQL Server or something like that, or a MongoDB document database, a vector database has got a vector structure, which basically it's like a graph of knowledge, relating closely related knowledge to one another.
Yeah,
So if I say Rudolph and then maybe red and then nose come together, so Rudolph the red nose reindeer, sort of like these words might be having some
right,
distance between
right.
these vectors, right? Like that. Now, the fine tuning process is simply to put information into this vector database such that the concepts that are related to your organization are now closer to one another, such that whenever you talk about certain things, related concepts can be picked up by the engine to return the relevant information. So that's
Okay,
what the process of fine tuning is. And the way we do it as humans is to provide documents or videos or audio or whatnot to an engine. That's what we do in our platform, so that the LLM uses this information. It's usually converted into text from whichever audio, video, all this converted to text, and then these vectors get established. It's almost like synapses getting established in your brain, so that all the closely related concepts are near one another. The distance is reduced, is near one another. So if I ask you about something, immediately you can relate all the related concepts and bring back a relevant answer. So that's the fine tuning process. The what you described earlier was more elaborate form of what do you call it, prompt engineering, and so on.
Got it. Let me ask you something. When you talk about this concept of being able to do fine tuning, is it typically an enterprise that would spend the money to buy a pine cone, to be able to build all the content together, to take all the information in one place on the series and the history of data that they have, then to build the bindings and the vector, then to do prompt engineering on top of that? Are there any use cases where individuals might do fine tuning as a way to be able, and are there less, I guess the word is, onerous ways to do fine tuning for individuals and people? Let's say you are a founder and you wanted to do something very small. Is it possible to do that, or is it only okay? You've got to have AWS, you've got to buy a lot of monthly compute and then do all of these other things.
So this is, you hit the nail on the head. So when we started off the company, um, it reminded me of the days when in the early 90s when you wanted to do GUI programming in Windows or something like that.
Yeah,
You needed to know C++, Visual
yeah.
C++. And as you know, Visual C++ and C++ as a language has got a certain barrier. It's complex, and not every programmer in the world could master it. You'd
A
have
steep learning
dangling
curve.
steep learning curve, dangling pointers, hard to debug, that type of thing. It's a little bit more
And you
onerous,
had to
right?
do memory management, if you remember.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Now, what did Microsoft do? They said, the average developer can understand Visual Basic.
Yeah.
Let me bring Visual Basic, drag and drop your UI, put your buttons, your radio buttons, your drop down list, da 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 da, and then just add some business logic, and you've got an app. Now you're very productive. So the way we started to think about this AI space is the same way you just described it. It's very onerous. So instead of doing that, we have a kind of a IDE, which is drag and drop. And so basically, you say, I'm going to train this brain. Here are all the documents I want to train it on. And this is the model. You can pick Llama, Mistral, whatever you want. And let me upload all the documents, and it'll start fine tuning. So it's easy for a non-technical person to do it, a single person or even an enterprise. So you can fine tune your model. It'll take some time behind the scenes doing its thing, building all of these vectors and so on, but it's not complex. You don't need to be a programmer to do it. And once the model is ready, then we have the ability to associate that model with an avatar or a voice or a chat, or even embed it within devices and so on, so that it's got some sort of UX. This is the brain, but you need to interact with people, right? You have to have a UX of some sort, and that UX will come in different forms. Avatar means you can pick whichever avatar you want, voice, and also which language you want to speak in English, Spanish, French, whatever it is, you can pick all of that. And so then you have a fully functioning tool without having to spend weeks and months coding and patching together a bunch of stuff. Out comes an agent which is really functional, which knows your business and can go to work immediately.
Yeah.
And but augmenting that, we believe that nobody has got a monopoly on all the knowledge in the world, right? Obviously not. So we have created a marketplace where you can augment your agent with knowledge from other vendors, other people who have built these brains, so to speak. So you might build a first cut of your agent. Let's say if I was in the banking space, I built an agent, but let's say that some other third party has built a risk model. He's got a handle on a better risk assessment model for loans or whatnot. You can take that brain and plug it into your agent's system, almost like Elon Musk's neural link. You can plug it in, and your agent has now got more capabilities than what it started off with. So we have a marketplace where you can do additional things to your agent so that it can get the best of all worlds. And there are a few other things that are happening in the industry, like all these legacy SaaS applications. Now, as you might have heard, this model context protocol that Anthropic built is starting to be sort of like almost the days of ODBC or JDBC and so on. It's like a
Yeah.
way to link to. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So these agents now are starting to be part of an ecosystem where they can not only function on their own, but also link into existing infrastructure, existing SaaS applications, and be very functional.
Awesome. Tell me a last question that I think a lot of my audience also wants to learn about, right? Which is as agents become more prevalent, as AI becomes a lot more useful, what does this mean for the ability for the individual to be more creative? Do agents get the aspect of being able to manage creativity, or is that something that humans will always have and agents will be focused more, or AI will be focused more on repetitive stuff? What I mean by that is you can be creative and you say, I don't want to do all this. I'm going to give this to the agent, and the agent does the work.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think there are different viewpoints. There are some folks in the industry who claim that we are close to AGI, and I tend not to be one of those people. I tend to think that spontaneous thought is still the domain of humans because we
Yeah.
can spontaneously think, oh, I want to go and have a Coke. Let me go to the fridge and get a Coca Cola and start drinking. An agent cannot spontaneously want to feel things and do things. Unless told, it doesn't do things. But so I still feel that they are in the domain of repetitive work, and that creativity is still in the domain of humans. Now, agents can, let's say in a creative process, there might be 20, 30, 50% of repetitive or grunt work that the human doesn't want to spend time doing it. That part can be sort of like um outsourced to the agent to do, and then the human can now further his creative process, because instead of getting bogged down with I'll just make up an example like putting together a PowerPoint or something. It can go and do that while you think about the next idea or whatnot. Or taking the idea and extrapolating it into 10 API calls or whatever. It can start to code that while you start to think about what's the next capability. So I think it sort of like unshackles humans from the
Drudgery.
boring drudgery, exactly. And now you can go and think about more creative things. So I think that's a very, very good use of AI, actually.
Raghu, thank you very much. This was a great introduction. I think I'm going to continue to keep coming to you once every 3, 6 months just to check in on where things are, because I think the
Happy to.
advantage you have is being a professor, you also know how to explain concepts that are easily understandable, given that most of the audience tends to be in different stages of knowledge. right? Some people know what MCP is and they are building MCP servers with a host and putting application protocols in place. Other people are saying, I'm using ChatGPT to ask my best recipe for, you know, carrot cake. It's all over the spectrum, right? It's always good to get someone like you who can walk the spectrum and say, here's where this helps and this is where it might not help, or here's where this might be useful or not.
Happy to do that. Thank you.